All right. I think we have a few people who have joined in. I think the rest of the folks will be joining in as we go ahead. So yeah, base morning, everyone. I'm Aniket. I take care of community at Deffolio, and today we are going to be talking about the trading track at this on-chain summer buildathon. And this is definitely part of the on-chain summer buildathon workshop series where we have been covering each track uh, per day and then having like speakers come in from the respective partners to help you make the best project in that particular track. So today we have trading on our agenda, and for that we have Zoomer here from Aerodrome who would be able to help you out the best over here. There's also going to be a Q&A session, so feel free, like DeFi being its own niche. So definitely we can understand you're going to be having a couple of questions. So feel free to drop them in the Q&A box. You might be seeing it at the bottom bar of your Zoom panel. And yeah, Zoomer, over it to you.
Hey, yeah. So good to meet you all. I work on development. I'll start with a intro to Aerodrome. So Aerodrome is a VE33 DEX. So it's a DeFi protocol on Base, and it takes a lot of influence from Uniswap and Curve. It has basic pools, so that includes a standard passive Uniswap V2 style AMM, and then a passive stable swap AMM for stable coins or ETH derivatives. And then the other pools are the slipstream pools, which are concentrated liquidity pools. And those were launched only a few months ago, but they've kind of already overtaken the other pools. But the kind of crux of the project is the voting in the gauges. So you can lock the Arrow token to get an Arrow VNFT, and you can use this VNFT to vote to direct which pools Arrow emissions are going to go to. So you'll receive the trading fees from those pools and any incentives deposited to those pools. And what this does is kind of creates a flywheel where Aerodrome has become the easiest place to spin up large liquidity on Base, and then all the traders go there, and then a lot of the community is bought into this process by locking Arrow and receiving, substantial rewards from the platform for doing that. So yeah, if you haven't already, I definitely recommend checking out the DApp at aerodrome.finance, and then I'll be going through our GitHub later. Yeah, I think should I go through just the general like trading track and a general summary or?
Yep. That definitely should help. Can give people
Okay, cool.
context
Yeah.
more on the trading track. Yes.
Yeah. So what is special about this track in my eyes is that Base is in a unique spot where there is about $8 billion of TVL on the chain, and yet there's only 1.6 or $1.7 billion of DeFi TVL on the chain. So less than a quarter of the assets on the chain are being used in DeFi. Most of the assets, these may be people that are new to coming on chain, and haven't really dipped their toes into DeFi yet, but the assets aren't being used as efficiently as they could be, especially when you compare to other chains where a lot of other chains may have over half their TVL on the chain is participating in DeFi. So there's really a big opportunity already for DeFi on Base, even without needing to bring more people on chain, just the existing users on chain. So now is a really opportune time to be working on trading in DeFi on Base, and try to attract some of that, $6 billion plus on Base that aren't participating in DeFi right now. And so that's kind of that's Aerodrome's focus, and that's really what I think the trading in DeFi landscape is about here on Base. Yeah. So should I go into our repos or next, or
Yep.
should we go? We can go through ideas also. I don't know if I should.
Yeah. We can go to the repo first, and then we can go ahead and discuss some ideas on what
Cool.
people can build in the trading track.
Cool. So I will share the repos. Okay. And you can see my screen, right?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll go through the contract specs first. Yeah, so the contract specs, you kind of see, it summarizes the AMM first. So there's the generic pools, and there's the volatile and stable pools that I mentioned earlier. And these pools are, if you're familiar at all with Uniswap V2 or Curve, these take a lot of inspiration there. Kind of the unique feature here is that if you stake your liquidity, then you give up your trading fees, and those trading fees will go to the VNFT voters. And so in return, you'll be incentivized by the Aero emissions, but you'll give up your fees over to the voters. And that's kind of how the whole flywheel works. The router, we have a standard Uniswap V2 router, and then we have Uniswap V3 inspired universal router as well. Those are a bit more like we can do Q&A or in the Discord as well. I can help people if people are interested in understanding how to form arguments to do a swap if you're trying to create a custom swap UI or something of that nature. And then, yeah, a unique feature we have as well is the factory registry. So many factories can be added. So this kind of makes it seamless to add new pool types and things of that nature. So there doesn't need to be an entire like redeployment of the project to introduce a new type of AMM. They can kind of seamlessly be integrated into the existing code base just by adding them to the factory registry. And then here we have the Aero token and the voting process with the VNFTs. Yeah, I guess one thing that maybe people aren't as aware of is that we have this feature called Relay, where you can delegate your VNFT for a managed VNFT to vote for it on behalf of it. And what this does is automate your whole voting process so that you don't need to be voting every week. And so there's kind of different types of relays that are available, but the relays, the most common one is the Aero Maxi VNFT, which essentially just votes optimally based on APR and then compounds everything back into your Aero VNFT. But yeah, this is an interesting design space because we haven't really the managed VNFTs and the delegation and the relay. That's a very novel mechanism that isn't really seen on any other DeFi projects, and so we haven't really had any partner protocols or anything like that integrate or build products on top of it. But it is a really interesting design space. So there's definitely a lot of ideas that can be thrown around there. And then these are kind of the minter contract is the contract that creates the emissions. The rewards distributor decides the curve and the rebases on the VNFT, which serves the purpose of benefiting the lockers. And then we have some tertiary contracts. And then the voter contract is what handles all the voting logic. And then these are kind of smaller contracts that connect to everything else. And then we have governance as well, but governance is going to be implemented in the coming months and is not live yet. So that's kind of like the specs of the whole project. But I'll go into kind of our equivalent of an API over on Sugar. Yeah, so Sugar essentially something that makes Aerodrome a bit different than other DeFi protocols is that many DeFi protocols will use, say, a centralized API or a centralized indexer like a subgraph to feed data to their dApp or into analyze data in general. Aerodrome does it a bit differently, where we have deployed contracts on chain where they just simply have functions that you can call from the smart contract and it'll return data. And everything is very aggregated. So you'll see um, I'm trying to avoid going directly into the code, but like um, we have kind of the signature of a function described here. So you can fetch data of a pool, and this data that you see here will all be um, given in a single function call. So what you can do is kind of just call one function and get for hundreds of pools, um, get the contract address, the pool symbol, um, how much liquidity there is, what type of pool it is, how many tokens are in the pool, how many tokens have been staked in the pool, and how many are unstaked, um, whether or not that pool has a gauge for incentives, um, how many emissions that pool is receiving, how many rewards the LPs are getting, how many fees have accrued currently. So really, there's a lot of data here that you can just fetch in a single call. And so if you want to get like pool data, you can call this all function, and you have a limit and an offset. But generally, you can specify hundreds of pools and get all of this data for hundreds of pools on the platform. Aerodrome has right now, I believe, about a little over 1,000 pools total. And yeah, then you can get for specific user data, you can get, say, all of their positions. So this is an example of like you can return all of the positions for a user, and for each position you'll get the ID of the position, the amount of liquidity, whether or not it's staked and how much is staked, how much what they've earned in terms of fees. For the concentrated pools, all of the data about the specific parameters of the position, like where it's located for tick pricing. Yeah, and then we have voting data as well. So there's kind of like 3 separate files. There's LP Sugar. This handles everything related to pools and positions, and it'll also handle voting data for specific pools. And then Relay Sugar over here handles everything related to Relay. That's the delegation for your VNFTs. So this is used to, for example, return data about a relay, and if a user has deposited their VNFTs into the relay. And then V Sugar is everything related to your voting and your VNFTs. Yeah, so these definitely, this is atypical. When many of you may be familiar with subgraphs or just generic APIs. The goal with Aerodrome here that we had was to kind of avoid centralized dependencies and build a fully on-chain dApp, and not be wrestling with AWS or whatever else people are using. And so all you need to be able to do is, Node or RPC, make a view function call to retrieve this information off chain. And yeah, we think it works pretty well when you can kind of get all of the data of say hundreds of pools in a single like function call like that. But yeah, definitely, because this is kind of a newer, unique thing. Happy to help people out with navigating Sugar, because I know that's maybe not typical for people. Yeah, so I think that's kind of all I have for the going over the repos.
Makes sense. I think we have one question that I can see in the Q&A box. We can go through that, and then we can move ahead to like discussing a few good ideas people can consider building for the trading track.
Okay, cool. Yeah, should I go over this question right now?
Yeah. Do you want me to read
Okay.
it off for you?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So Giloco.eth from the builders have asked like, there's two. It's a twofold question. One is, what are your thoughts on AA and DeFi on-chain finance applications? And second is track. This track describes mostly as trading, but do projects building on top of any DeFi protocol qualify for this track?
Yeah, so AA and DeFi, assuming here AA means account abstraction. Account abstraction is very interesting. Aerodrome has the Coinbase smart wallet integration that went live on June 6th or June 7th. I think we've seen a lot of users coming in through that. I wouldn't be surprised if when more projects start integrating with the smart wallet that we see, maybe half of new users coming to Aerodrome are using the Coinbase smart wallet. I think that some of the projects are still getting ramped up with it, but users seem to really be preferring account abstraction. So yeah, I think in terms of like ideas related to account abstraction, I don't know exactly what, because like the Aerodrome DApp is already integrated with Coinbase Smart Wallet. I'm not sure what design space there is there for what can be done, but my general thoughts on account abstraction and Smart Wallet is that very, very optimistic about it being able to bring a lot of new users on board. That's kind of why Aerodrome chose to go live with that on day one or day two or whenever it was a week or two ago. And then, yeah, the track in trading and DeFi. I think anything in DeFi is eligible on the track, like anything trading related. I think it's pretty open ended. I definitely would say that, and then I know that part of the track is also synthetics, and so they have a lot of ideas on what people can build. But definitely like anything trading related, especially like spot trading, usually some sort of Aerodrome just being almost half of Base's DeFi TVL. You're likely going to want to kind of like pursue the Aerodrome avenue of figuring out how you can integrate it or how that plays into what current users are doing. Can you fetch APR and TVL via Sugar? Yeah, good question. Let me go ahead and share. Is it good if I go through these Q&As now, by the way?
Yeah, 100%.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I'm happy to keep going through these because I know this stuff can get confusing.
Fair enough.
I'm going to go over and share my screen on GitHub again. Yeah, so TVL and APR. So in terms of what you see on the Aerodrome DApp, TVL, so like, yeah, this is the output of a pool, as you can see right here. And so the reserves of the pool, reserve 0 and reserve 1 are kind of like standard functions of a pool contract that return the amount of the first token and the amount of the second token in that pool. So to get the TVL, you can just say, reserve 0 is the number of the first token, and reserve 1 is the number of the second token. Pricing, there's different ways to handle pricing. Like you see a lot of projects kind of just use, maybe DeFi Llama API or something like that. We do have a fully on-chain pricing contract, but unless people really want me to go into that, I'm not going to go into that because for most like hackathon use cases, you probably just use, DeFi Llama API or something that you can hook up quickly. And then APR, yeah. So what you see on the Aerodrome DApp APR is factored on the emissions. So the emissions are the aero emissions that the given pool gets per second. So if you calculate the TVL of the pool, what the Aerodrome DApp does is gets the dollar denominated TVL of the pool using reserve 1 and reserve 0 and the prices of those tokens, and then gets the dollar denominated emissions per second using the emissions output from Sugar, and then multiplies that by seconds in a day, and then days in a week and then weeks in a year. And that'll give you the APR of the pool. And yeah, generally the APRs displayed on the DApp they focus on the APRs based on the emissions, just because 90% or more of liquidity is staked and therefore forgoes the fees in order to get the emissions.
Oh, my bad, I was on mute. So yeah, folks, if you have any other questions, feel free to drop it in the Q&A box. And meanwhile, I just scroll through the chat and I see a question from Liam. Would it be okay to go over the swap executions? I guess this is coming from an AMM contract.
Yeah, let me, I'll share GitHub again. And let's go over to the router. Yeah, so what you see on swap executions is yeah, so some of these are the inputs of the swap call. So I'll go over, like, amount in is the raw amount of the token that you're spending, and then amount out min is the desired amount of the token that you'll receive. Amount out min here is referred to as amount out min because the transaction will revert if it tries to give you an amount lower than this amount. So essentially, this is the amount that output that includes slippage. So if you say you wanted to trade 10 USDC for 10 DAI, and you wanted 2% slippage, you would set amount out min as 9.8. So you'd factor in that 2% slippage in the amount out min parameter. Address 2 is who gets to receive the outputted tokens. So this is almost always going to be the person calling the address calling the swap function. And then deadline is the timestamp deadline by which if the swap tries to fill after this timeline, then it'll revert. And so that's generally something that a parameter that many projects will use on Ethereum mainnet, where you don't want a stale swap existing in the mempool for 20 minutes and then getting filled at a bad price because a long time passed and the prices of the assets moved. But generally, deadline is just the current timestamp, and then maybe you add 10 minutes or 5 minutes to ensure that the transaction can get through. There isn't really, just because of the architecture base, there isn't really concern for MEV or anything like that that would take advantage of the deadline. So the Aerodrome DApp, I believe, defaults to 10 minutes, the current timestamp of the submitted transaction, plus 10 minutes for the deadline. And then the big thing is the routes parameter. So I believe, I want to say route is, I'm trying to remember where that is declared. I think it might be. Yeah, so here you see this is what a route is. It gives you, so the routes parameter gives you an array of this route struct. So you can have many of these. And what this represents is essentially like a hop in a swap. So if you want to go from USDC to Arrow, and the best route happens to be USDC to DAI, DAI to Arrow, what you would do here is you'd have that swap has 2 hops, and so the array of routes would involve 2 of these structs. So the first element of the array would be a struct that says address from is USDC, address to is DAI. Bool stable here represents whether or not it's a stable pool. So if it's true, then that's a stable swap pool. If it's false, then it uses the volatile pool. So USDC to DAI, the most liquid pool there is going to be the stable swap pool because those are like assets. They're both stable coins. So you'd say USDC for from, DAI for to. The stable pool would be true. And then the factory is the address of the pool factory that the pool is created from. So what I can do is, the pool factory is that the deployed addresses are in this repo, but generally where the best place to go to get the current deployed contracts is on the dApp itself. There's a whole page that has a few dozen contracts. But basically, you'd look at the regular pool factory, which is the non-slipstream factory, which is where this pool would have been created. And then like the second route to go from DAI to Arrow, you'd say address from is DAI, address to is Arrow. You're going to know that like the most liquid pool is the volatile pool because Arrow and DAI are not alike assets. And then the factory would be the same factory. So that's kind of how the routes parameter, I'll go back to the router contract. But that's kind of how the routes should look like. So yeah, it is slightly different than like say a Uniswap, but these other arguments are pretty much operate the same as other dexes that you may be used to. And then there's the different variants of swaps depending on whether or not you're inputting ETH or that sort of thing. And this is kind of inherited from all the other big dexes that you may see.
Sounds good. Don't think we have any open questions for now. I think like we can just go through a couple of ideas, anything you have on your mind, which you feel like, what are the things people should look out for when they are building on the trading track. I think if we can discuss some pointers on that. And meanwhile, if people have any questions, again, feel free to drop it in the Q&A box and then we can get to it.
Cool, yeah. So I'd say that I guess part of the nature of like the trading and DeFi on chain is that nobody really knows like what's going to catch on and what won't, and things are just unpredictable in general. So I'd say like be open-minded with ideas. I can, if needed later on, I can like rattle off ideas that sound cool that I've always had in my head, but I'd say generally the execution is going to be more important than the idea often. And what I'll be looking for particularly is I'd say that when I would go to hackathons when I was younger, for example, there was always kind of a bit of a bias towards like UI, UX, and maybe back-end engineering wasn't rewarded as much, just because it's easier and quicker to evaluate the former. So I'd say naturally, like we know that it's difficult to work with smart contracts in DeFi, and so I'll probably place a premium on that kind of work just because it's rare, and even an incremental improvement or just small pieces of code that end up getting reused later on, or someone picks up the development later on, like those can end up being pretty impactful. So I'd say like don't shy away from trying to like do something even if it's difficult, because yeah, especially for this track in particular, it's going to be one of the more complex tracks just by the nature of smart contracts being difficult to work with. So yeah, if you're integrating in any way with the smart contracts and showing promise there, that's something that I view highly. But really, whatever people are interested in working on, it's probably going to have some value. This is like an area that DeFi on base is an area that is really prime for growth, just based on the metrics of $6 billion of capital is not in DeFi on base, and it's kind of just sitting there, and it's probably going to migrate over. And so, yeah, it's very open-ended what can be done here.
Sounds good. I think I'm just gonna take a call on a last round of any questions if people have. You can use it in the Q&A box. I think we can just give this another minute, and if people have no other questions, we can call it a wrap. Oh, as I said, are there any test environments or testnet deployments? This is coming from Anonymous.
Yes, so there actually are not any testnet deployments. Big part of this is that most of the time, especially lately, the cost of transacting on base should be sub 1 cent for most of the transactions on Aerodrome. And so there's no public testnet deployment. I'll say that the Aerodrome developers, when doing more complicated testing, will use something like Tenderly and use like a local forked environment to test there. But I can definitely give tips on specifics of how you may want to test things. A lot of, especially in this era, a lot of wallets, if you generate a transaction through a wallet, it'll involve a simulation. And so a wallet will kind of tell you ahead of time whether or not a transaction will succeed. And so that's something that's very useful when testing on, that it'll do on mainnet when testing, is you don't have to really submit transactions to understand if they're working properly or not. But yeah, no like Sepolia public testnet deployment is available, but the combination of kind of mainnet or like a local forked network is what the Aerodrome developers use.
Sounds good. Another question, can we get a token list from the SDK, that is token addresses on base and symbols?
Yes, let me share my screen again. Yeah, definitely good question. This is a part of the Sugar SDK. I can, I think it's easiest if I go into the contract that handles the pools has a function called tokens. And so what this does is gives all of the token data for all tokens that exist in pools on Aerodrome. So you can specify a limit and offset. You can fetch hundreds of tokens in their data. You can input an account optionally as well, and what that'll do is show that account's balance of all of these tokens. And then you can also input an addresses array, and this is a custom array of tokens that maybe don't exist in Aerodrome, but you want the data for them regardless. So you can input your own tokens and get all the data about them. And then the sort of output format of what the token looks like is right here. And this gives you the address, the symbol, name of the token, the decimals, the balance of the user that you inputted, how much of that token they own, and then whitelisted, which is whether or not this token is whitelisted on Aerodrome to have gauges created that allows that token to receive emissions to incentivize its trading. And let me check if you asked about. Yeah, so that's for symbols and addresses. Logos, There is a service that we use for logos called SmallDApp. I can go open up SmallDApp. There's a lot of different ways to handle token logos. Like, as you may know, common APIs like DeFi Llama and CoinGecko, I believe, can handle token logos. And then there's kind of the base official token list, but this is like what Aerodrome uses for token logos. So yeah, SmallDApp here, this token repo that I linked just has token logos for, a few hundred tokens on base. I can link the I believe it's Optimism Superchain token list contains base data. And that is, I believe that's this repo. And that contains some logos as well. Yeah, so this question, are there any inbuilt bridges to Aerodrome? There are not. There's no bridge integrated into the dApp of Aerodrome, and there is no, for the Aero token, for example, there is no bridging setup. Aero kind of exists in a vacuum on base, just to try to be fully focused on base. There definitely is, it's worthwhile to think about bridging in the context of how to easily get people onto base, and especially with the tokens on Aerodrome. One thing that is kind of seen over and over again is that there's hundreds of tokens on Aerodrome. They all tend to have traction as base has grown, and they use different bridging standards. So they either use layer 0 or Axelar, or they use the canonical bridge. The canonical bridge, has the drawback of the 7-day waiting period to return the token to Ethereum mainnet. And so I definitely, one thing that maybe a less technical path of that would be useful is kind of in-depth documentation for projects that want to come to base and they have a token that they want to bridge to base. Documentation that shows what their options are for how to bridge to base, and what the kind of pros and cons of each are. That would help a lot. Right now, there's very little standardization. We've seen, especially, there's a lot of meme coins that may take off and generate a lot of volume, but they don't really have experts on their team. And so they may kind of pick a not optimal bridging solution, and then they regret it later on down the line. And then they end up deciding to endorse another bridging solution later. And then they end up with, 3 different tokens with the same ticker, and it gets confusing for users. So yeah, that's definitely something that is worth thinking about.
If I'll give it maybe another minute. If anyone has any questions, any follow-up questions, it could be about the track, it could be about Aerodrome, and even if you already are building something, you wish to get some feedback, you can drop in your idea as a question. Anything works. I think one just popped up right now. Is there a route API similar to 1inch to populate those routes for the swaps?
Yeah, that's a very good question. There is kind of an open task that the Aerodrome team has been working on for specifically that, like a swap specific SDK. It does not exist yet. We hope to have that go live within a few months. It's just that on the list of priorities, it hasn't been as high as some of the, just pushing Slipstream out and some of these other tasks. So unfortunately, no, there's no route API, 1inch-esque route API or SDK to populate the routes for the swaps. If definitely, that's something where in Discord for the Buildathon, if you choose to go the path of creating something that involves a direct swap integration, and you're having trouble with populating, picking the optimal route, or populating the route data for the swaps, I can help with that for sure. It's something that we we hope to have like a full solution for that that's very easy to integrate. But unfortunately, right now you kind of have to code that by hand, and it's not terrible to code by hand. Ultimately, it is just comparing. You check all these different routes, and then you compare the outputs. Um, but yeah, I can definitely help with that if needed.
Um, Another question: can we create futures slash forwards on top of the swap functions?
Yeah, definitely. Using Specifically, like using the liquidity in Aerodrome to do kind of interesting things, whether it be like settling futures positions or anything like that. That's a really interesting design space. Trying to remember which, like, obviously there's many lending markets that have integrated Arrow's pools, and use that as a source of liquidity to like fill their liquidations or things of that nature, or even to price assets. So that's all. This is kind of like a proven use case. So yeah, I'd say that ultimately the interface is very similar to like what you'd see on a Uniswap. Um, but yeah, I think that you're definitely headed in the right direction in terms of like there is so much liquidity in these pools, and kind of anything that you may be able to build on top is there's really a lot of possibilities there.
Sounds good. Um, we'll like maybe take another couple of seconds to just check with everyone if anyone has any other questions, or we can call this a wrap for today. Um, I think we are all good for now. Um, So yeah, that's cool. Thanks a lot, Zoomer, for taking out the time and joining us for this workshop to help out builders understand more about the trading track, about Aerodrome and Sugar and all the tools they can use to build the next big dApp that is out there. Um, like I feel like a lot of things we discussed today would definitely be helpful for people who joined in, and then of course this has also been live streamed simultaneously, so it will be available on YouTube for people to go through later, especially with the ones who have been, who are participating at this buildathon, focusing on the trading track. Zoomer, like any closing thoughts you have, would be great if you could share them.
Yeah, definitely. I'd say yeah. Thanks everyone for coming out. If there's anything I can leave people with, it would be that just kind of do your best on this sort of thing. This is definitely, um, I know it's not easy to work with smart contracts or to work with DeFi. So obviously we'll be keeping that in mind, but um, yeah, definitely like really try to experiment and do something cool. And I'll be in the base Discord, in the Buildathon channel. So yeah, don't be afraid to ask questions, for sure.
Thanks a lot, Zoomer. So as Zoomer said, like there is a specific trading track channel on the base Discord. Let me also drop the link as I speak. So this is the link to the base Discord in case you're not a part of it. You will find there's a category called Onchain Summer Buildathon, and over there are different channels for different tracks. So trading being one of them. So feel free to join in. If you have any questions, feel free to tag Zoomer there. He'd be happy to help out. And once again, thanks a lot, Zoomer, for taking out the time. Um, And and for the builders, I think like tomorrow we don't have anything in particular schedule, but Monday we're going to be having the second half of the trading track with synthetics. So you should be receiving an invite for that shortly. And yeah, wishing everyone all the very best.
Cheers, everyone. Thanks.
Right. Thanks, Zoomer. Thanks for joining in, folks.